right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the show. Jim Kantowski, joined by my colleague Jake Sadler in Asheville, North Carolina. And today we are picking up where we left off on our last episode. We're going Social Security 2.0, just like the Secure Act 2.0, right, Jake?
I think we could keep going on this, and I was like laughing before we start because we're just gonna keep going deeper into this, and we're not gonna get all the way in as deep as we could go. This is a 3-part series, and I think we're just trying to cover a lot of really good ground at a high level on a subject that I think I mentioned this in the last episode. On the surface, it's like, oh, Social Security, it seems pretty straightforward. But when you start, peeling back the layers of this onion, it gets pretty complicated pretty fast.
Yeah, I was going to say we're going to go really deep into this topic, and you're still not going to have any good answers.
I think that may be the case. And as with so many things that we talk about, it's like, we need to investigate this in much more detail. But maybe that's the theme of this whole series on Social Security. It's really, to just kind of begin to peel back the layers of the onion and kind of convey that idea that this may or may not be straightforward as a filing strategy if you're considering your options. And more than likely, the best, plan of action is to look into your filing strategy options in a lot of detail and explore those so that you can make the best possible decision for yourself and your family.
Yeah. So you want to look into, we're going to get stuck here on this. I feel it, but you want to look into it on detail, but yet it all depends on a complete unknown about when you pass. So I think what you're saying in terms of detail is you need to get your numbers correct. You need to know the exact amounts that you'll receive at different ages and so forth. But the reality is, these decisions are the exact answer is unknown because they all based on when you die. And so we can give you the best advice possible. But it's just hard to say whether it's going to be right or wrong. And so one of the things we were talking about before this call is it's almost like what you need to do is you need to have a pros and cons list of when you're taking the Social Security. You sort of evaluate some things, don't overkill it, but just give it some really thorough thought, the pros and cons of when to take it, take your benefits, your taxable situation, like we talked about last week, what your other income sources are, what your other assets are, who your beneficiaries are, where you're trying to leave your money, all those different factors sum up to a very precise answer of let's do the best we can to get this right.
Yeah, I think all the things you pointed to, it's really, again, like the way that we look at making these types of decisions is, okay, what are the uncertainties that are hanging out there that we're kind of managing for within the decision that we have in front of us? And when it comes to Social Security, longevity is a really important uncertainty that's hanging out there that materially impacts the decision that you make about when to file or when your spouse may choose to file and that sort of thing. But we have to focus on the knowns that we have in this equation, this decision equation. And that points to all the things that you just described, different sources of income. And it points to the, Social Security benefit estimates that you have and kind of knowing how your benefit is going to change, whether you file at that designated full retirement age. So again, 67, if you're born 1960 or later, if you're going to wait till 70 or file earlier than that, as early as 62. So I think we focus on, the knowns we have in front of us to help you make that best possible decision to manage for those uncertainties that are hanging out there.
You got it. So focus on the knowns. And the other one we like to say is control what you can control. And that gives you the best chance of reaching your goals. So last week, in our last episode, we did talk about, the general filing benefits, how much you might receive, how benefits are calculated, the different ages you can take them and the different sort of discounts or increases you would receive as long as you wait. And so this time we're going to get into a little bit more detail, as you mentioned. We're going to talk about spousal benefits, how they work. We're going to talk about divorced benefits, how they work. And we're going to talk about survivor benefits, how they work. And you're a little bit more of an expert on this and have a little bit more of the details than I do. So I'm going to get curious and ask you, just tell me about spousal benefits. There's this seems to be this I don't know, misconception or a lot of misinformation out there about spousal benefits, and we get a lot of questions about that. So why don't you just in general talk about spousal benefits and how they work?
Yeah, I think that's, one of the objectives of today. Again, we could get into the weeds on exactly how these types of benefits are calculated and how that may be relevant to the decision that you're trying to make and so forth. But, I think we're going to kind of keep it at a medium, kind of mid level in terms of what we're going to discuss on the rule set. And most importantly, I think we want to help to dispel some of the misinformation that you pointed out is really out there. I was just checking out, an article from the AARP. They did a survey of their members, and they asked the question, where are you getting the information that you're using, to make your decision on filing for Social Security? Do you know what the number one source of information was for
TikTok.
AARP members for their? It's not TikTok. I mean, come on, it's the demographic. I don't know.
Social Security, right. Okay, all right. Instagram then.
Instagram, no.
Facebook for the older people.
Yeah. Yeah, it was friends and family, so probably all of the
Friends and
above
family,
was
yeah.
Yeah. So friends and family was the number one source of information for AARP members in this survey, where they got the information they needed to make this decision. And quite honestly, that's not where you want to go to get your information. You can get some of your information there, but at least verify what you're hearing.
Yeah.
So when it comes to spousal benefits and divorced spouse benefits, this is where it gets a little trickier. And so this is where the misinformation begins to crop up a little bit more. So, spousal benefits, and we talked last time, again, about kind of just the basics of the retirement and Social Security retirement benefit, when you can file as early as too late as 70. And that, special age, that full retirement age, that's when you get your full unreduced or unincreased benefit amount. So those ages are relevant to, all these other types of benefits. So that the spousal benefit is really designed and intended so that a spouse in a married couple who has no earnings or less earnings than the other spouse or the higher earning spouse, so that they could receive some sort of meaningful benefit based on their spouse's earnings record. And I think just maybe a little quick example of how that would work, and then we kind of touch on some of the high points of the rules and so forth. But if you kind of think about, say you have a married couple, and let's just make it simple and give them the same age. So spouse number one, they get to age 67. That's going to be their full retirement age. And their primary insurance amount, the PIA, at their full retirement age is just say $2,000 a month. They go ahead and they file for their benefit. Well, their other spouse, they were perhaps a homemaker and they didn't have any earnings per se, in their Social Security benefit calculation. So if they were to file based on their own earnings record, they don't have an earnings record. They didn't get their 40 qualifying quarters. They don't have a Social Security benefit, but they go into the office.
Can I just stop?
Oh, wait, I'm over the numbers. Yeah,
I'm having a little fun right now because they obviously got their 40 quarters of hard work. I mean, the homemakers, the people at home taking care of the kids, let's give them a shout out because they are doing most of the work. And I think I've been presented multiple times with, hey, if you were to hire somebody to do this job, it would be X dollars. And so just to just to stay off track. So it's good they at least get half a benefit of their spouse. So sorry to interrupt. I just had to throw that.
No, it's a really good point. And I was thinking about this before the call. And, I was thinking about my own family and my goodness, homemaker, that's the hardest job. They deserve their 40 quarters. But in terms of Social Security and kind of how this is all factored in, this is actually kind of a thought that's gone into the design of spousal benefits.
Yeah.
Simply, the fact that, in a homemaker role, you're serving a valuable economic function within the household and within society as a whole. And so Social Security has been tweaked and refined over the years to have this spousal benefit for that purpose. And so, again, this example, spouse number one, they're the higher earning spouse. They had $2,000 a month at full retirement age. Spouse number two, they reach 67. They don't have an earnings history, but they go in and they claim a benefit. They claim their spousal benefit. And what it's going to be is 50% of the higher earning spouse's total benefit amount at their full retirement age. So in that scenario, the homemaker spouse or the one without an earnings history gets to collect $1,000 a month, and that's the spousal benefit. So the general rule is that the lower earning spouse can claim up to 50% of the higher earning spouse's primary insurance amount, again, the amount they would get at full retirement age. But of course, that's only if half of their benefit is higher than your own. So you can't double dip. And so, if in that previous example, the homemaker spouse actually had some earnings history in there and had a monthly benefit amount of $1,250 at their full retirement age, they would not be entitled to any spousal benefit amount because their primary insurance amount would have been higher than 50% of the higher earning spouses. So, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think the way the rules changed a few years back, and I think the way they're written is you have to take your benefit as a spouse. So let me just finish up. So you have to take your benefit as a spouse, and you can go into how it changed. And then also, I think from a technical perspective, and I think this is where some of the misinformation can come into play, is that 50% you're talking about, and the way the Social Security would describe it, it's actually your benefit. So let's say your benefit was $750 plus $250 for the benefit of the higher earning spouse. So they actually combine two amounts to get you to that $1,000 benefit. So it's super overcomplicated, but that's the way they would sort of describe it to you. I have that correct?
You do, and I'm kind of getting excited as you're describing because we're getting into some interesting details. I think number one, kind of to your point on there have been in the past some filing strategies available, particularly spousal benefit filing strategies, which are effectively no longer available. So January 1st, 2024 will be the final date and time when something called a restricted application can be filed. So we don't want to dwell on that. A very, very small segment of the population is really affected by that at this point in time. So we're just going to work on the current rules. There's nothing creative. When you go to file for a benefit, again, this is effective January 1st next year for everybody, but we're going to assume it's the rule right now. If you go in to file for a benefit, you're filing for everything. So you're deemed to have filed for your own benefit, for a spousal benefit. You can't get creative and just kind of cherry pick one and wait for another, that sort of thing. That's all gone. So I think your other point around how the benefits calculated is relevant. So in what you described, so say a lower earning spouse in the example we were using earlier, say they have a PIA primary insurance amount of $750, but if they go in to claim at full retirement age and their spouse has also done the same, they're entitled to 50% of their spouse's benefit, which would be $1,000 in that previous example. And the way it's calculated, you get $750 of your own, and then $250 would be what they call spousal benefit excess or spousal excess. Now, this is important because if you file earlier, and if your ages are different and this sort of thing, if you file earlier than full retirement age, your own benefit is reduced and the spousal benefit is also reduced. They're reduced at different amounts. And so the spousal benefit excess is actually reduced at kind of a faster rate. So it's just something to keep in mind. I think the overall point there is just as we described in that last episode, if you file earlier than your full retirement age, your benefit is reduced. Same thing applies when we're looking at spousal benefits. It's really all we need to remember is that your benefit's going to be reduced. You could get into the details on how that's exactly calculated and so forth, but keep in mind that it can be reduced. A couple of really key points, and this is where, again, some misinformation can crop up. So with a true spousal benefit for a married couple, the spouse, the higher earning spouse, has to have filed for their benefit in order to open up eligibility for the other spouse to claim the spousal benefit. So that's an important rule, and it's different when we talk about divorced spouses. I mentioned earlier that filing early will reduce the benefits. If there is a rule that you have to have been married for a year. So if you're just recently married, you will have to wait at least a year. And again, you cannot file for your own and then switch to a spouse. So can't get creative with those, kind of now gone restricted applications and so forth. So those are really, I think, the fundamental rules wanted to clear up. It's up to 50% of your spouse's full retirement age benefit. That does not increase if the higher earning spouse waits until age 70. So if the higher earning spouse waits to file for their own benefit until age 70, and let's just say, let me try to get the math at least approximately right here. Um, let's just say, that $2,000 a month PIA went up to $2,600 at age 70. The lower earning spouse trying to claim the spousal benefit would not get 1,300. They would still get 1,000 because remember that full retirement age amount was 2,000. So the benefit for the higher earning spouse waiting isn't so much in that it increases the spousal benefit beyond that full retirement age amount, but it can provide important survivor protection. We can talk about that some more.
Yeah, we're going to get the survivor benefits a couple down after this. But the one thing I want to clarify was, so your spouse, let's just say, for example, I'm the higher earner spouse. I have to file benefits in order for my spouse to get her benefits. Is that correct? So if I do not file at my full retirement age of 67 and I'm waiting till age 70, my wife, my spouse, cannot claim her benefit until I'm age 70 and I actually file. Do I understand that correctly?
She can claim her own benefit based on her own earnings.
Her own benefit, but not,
yes.
Got it, not her spousal benefit. So she would get that $750, whatever she wants, but the spousal benefit would not kick in. And if she had no historical earnings, there would be nothing, there would be no benefit of her own. So essentially, she would not be able to claim a benefit until I file for my benefits.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I think, kind of when you look at, because when you get into modeling different filing strategies for a couple, this is when we have to start taking into account differences in the earnings record, differences in the benefit amounts, differences in ages, and look at, okay, what's the kind of sequence of events here for filing? Because it could make sense in kind of an example where the age difference works, where, okay, the lower earning spouse, they file at, say, their full retirement age, and they start collecting, in the example we've been using, that $750 per month, and then the higher earning spouse waits until age 70 to file for their own. So I think you kind of have all these different types of scenarios that you can run with a married couple to look at pros and cons again. So I think I kind of spurred off of that example because I was getting a little lost in my train of thought there. But I think the point is there are a lot of different scenarios to look at with a married couple.
Yeah, there's a ton. And I think what we should do here is stay on the married couple and go to survivor benefits, since we sort of touched on that a little bit. I think that's a good place to head. And that's, first of all, tell me, what is the survivor benefit?
Yeah, so survivor benefits are available to individuals, who are either the surviving spouses or head of household, dependent child, or the surviving spouse. So when in the context of a married couple, a survivor benefit would be available for the spouse. And that benefit, go ahead.
I was just going to say, why is that important to know?
Well, so the survivor benefit is calculated differently, and it is as much as 100% of the deceased spouse's benefit amount. And so, this is different than the spousal benefit, because there we were talking about as much as 50% of the spouse's primary insurance amount. With the survivor benefit, here, the surviving spouse assumes the higher of the two benefits. That's the long story short. So in that type of, when we're looking at survivor scenarios, that's where perhaps for the higher earning spouse, it may make a lot of sense as a risk management strategy to delay filing until as long as possible and as late as age 70 in order to increase their benefit as much as possible. Because unlike the spousal benefit that I was describing earlier, where you don't really get there's no advantage to waiting to age 70, that doesn't transfer to the spouse, the survivor benefit does. So if you're able to wait till age 70 and accrue those delayed retirement credits, and you predecease your spouse, and they assume you're the higher of the two benefits, your benefit, then they kind of get the reward for you having waited.
It's almost like that survivor benefit is like a joint life expectancy, in a way, calculated, because you get it. You could, let's say you have a wife that's a few years younger, or a female spouse that typically would live a little bit longer.
Yeah.
You get your benefit and you take this larger amount for a period of time, and then you pass on. Your spouse jumps into that amount, and it carries on for a little longer of time. And I think what I heard you say was that if I'm the lower earning spouse, nobody's going to jump into that benefit anyways. I'm going to move up.
Yeah.
So there's no sense in delaying that a lot of times at the full retirement age once I can access that.
That's right. And I think this conversation jogged my memory to the example I was trying to get through earlier on spousal benefits and the example with the couple. So say in that example, like the lower earning spouse, they get to full retirement age, they file for their benefits, say it's $750 a month, whatever it is. And the higher earning spouse, they decide to wait until age 70. Okay, well, that could be a viable strategy where, okay, we've turned on one stream of Social Security income in the household. It's the lower earning spouse. She can't or he can't claim the spousal excess because the higher earning spouse hasn't yet filed, which again is that kind of necessary requirement to open up the spousal benefit. So for, in this example, a period of 3 years, lower earning spouse gets 3 years worth of benefits on their own record. The higher earning spouse reaches age 70. They kind of lock in for life a higher benefit amount for themselves and provide important protection for the other spouse if they're to survive. Because with the survivor benefit, you assume the higher of the two. And then at that point in time, the lower earning spouse can then capture that spousal benefit amount and kind of get bumped up to the $1,000 we were using in that example.
I think we need a whiteboard.
I know, like, scribbling around in my head. I'm like, I've got the pictures of what that looks like in my head, but we don't have the whiteboard.
We got to figure that out. We'll figure that out at some point in time, the whiteboard. Yeah. So like the survivor benefits, do we want to get into what the kids might receive, or we just want to acknowledge that the kids could receive something if there are children?
Yeah, no, this is important. And I think, when it comes to looking at all these strategies, this is a good kind of point to make, at least. We've seen so many of these scenarios over time, particularly when it comes to filing for retirement benefits, looking at spousal benefits, survivor benefits, all this sort of thing. We still rely on specialized tools and expertise and resources to help inform us and keep us up to speed on the rules so that we can really appropriately advise clients in this space. And kind of as we kind of get more into the realm of less common scenarios like family benefits, for example, that's where we certainly lean on, other specialized tools and resources, again, to kind of help keep us up to speed on where those rules are. But when it comes to, survivor benefits for a family, there are other eligible family members who could receive a benefit potentially. So a spouse who is, caring for a child under the age of 16, they can receive a family benefit. A child over 16 but under the age of 18 can also receive a benefit. And then a disabled child who became disabled before the age of 22. So there are some kind of specialized rules around those particular benefits. But again, the survivor benefit, that in the retirement income context kind of means one thing, but if you're kind of earlier in your working career, say perhaps, there still can be a meaningful survivor benefit for your family independence.
Yeah, I personal experience on that. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the 16 to 18 depends on if your child is a full-time student. They can receive that extra benefit.
Yeah, that's right. So there's some kind of additional rules around being able to receive it, that for the child to receive it for that kind of window of time.
It's one of the reasons I went to college. My mom would have, my dad died at a fairly young age and I was still 17. And she's like, you got to go to school so I can get this full-time benefit for you. I got to get paid for you. So yeah, it was, I remember those conversations vividly, that where, being in school was important for many reasons. And I'm kind of making a joke out of this, obviously, but but one of them was that she would be able to continue on with that Social Security benefits that she was receiving. So,
Yeah, and I think, it's a really good point because so often the conversation around Social Security, can easily kind of get segmented by demographics and say, okay, Social Security, this is only relevant, if you're kind of nearing your 60s. That is not the case at all. Social Security is a program that can potentially have benefits for really all ages. And I think we could talk a little bit disability benefits as well as one way in which, different demographics and age groups could take advantage of Social Security. But yeah, I think just to kind of wrap up on the survivor benefits, a couple of key rules here, and where there's some misinformation. Number one, and for the survivor benefit, you can actually start your survivor benefit as early as age 60. So that's a special number that just applies to these survivor benefits in this context. We're usually talking about 62 as that first opportunity and eligibility for filing, but you can take survivor benefit at age 60. It is reduced. One of the most important kind of items where there's some misinformation, you can file for a survivor benefit and wait to file for your own later. So in the example we just gave with the numbers, you could file perhaps for a survivor benefit at age 60 while allowing your own benefit to continue to grow, either through continued earnings or through delayed retirement credits, and then file for your own benefit at full retirement age or as late as age 70. So this is one of those special provisions. You can kind of take both.
yeah. So if you have a deceased spouse, I think you really do want to take the amounts that you're going to receive and make a very thoughtful decision,
Yeah.
around when you're taking those benefits, if you're taking them early and whether you're working and those sorts of things. So,
And remarriage, by the way, remarriage terminates the survivor benefit. And so that can factor in for some folks in decision making, kind of in their personal life. But I think that's something worth noting.
speaking of remarriage, we can switch to
Okay.
divorced benefits here. And because in the same, you do receive a divorced spousal benefit, I guess I'll call it. You probably have better
Yeah. Yeah.
terminology. And
Uh,
that is also uh, turned off if you remarry. So you want to give us
That's
just a little, we got like 2 minutes left, as we do, we've rambled on here, but you want to give us
yeah.
just a little bit about how these divorce spousal benefits work?
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good point on the divorce spouse benefits. So, divorce spousal benefits are essentially spousal benefits if you are divorced. And there are some certain rules. We'll cover those here in a minute. These are, available to individuals who are married to someone who is eligible for Social Security, retirement, or disability benefit. But again, they're now divorced. So, just like we were talking about with regular spousal benefits, with divorce spousal benefits, same thing, up to 50% of your divorced ex-spouse's primary insurance amount. Again, that amount at their full retirement age, but only if that amount is higher than your own benefit. There's again some key misinformation out there. Unlike the spousal benefit, if you're married, for divorced spouses, the ex-spouse does not have to file for their benefits in order to open up eligibility to file for the divorced spousal benefit. That's really important. And I think one of the concerns for folks that we work with as they're exploring their options for these divorced spousal benefits is, I don't want to engage with my ex-spouse at all. I don't want to let them know this is happening. I don't want to have to ask them to file. I don't want this to reduce their benefit. There are a lot of protections in place. None of those things are possible. So they don't have to file. The ex-spouse doesn't have to file to open up eligibility. They just have to be age 62. So that's the threshold. They have to be 62 and eligible for benefits. They don't have to do anything. So they don't have to go into Social Security office with you. They don't know that you filed for these benefits. All this sort of, their benefit is not reduced because you filed for these benefits. So they're really blind to this. And I think that's an important point to kind of drive home. Some criteria on the marriage, it has to have lasted 10 years in order to have access to this divorce spousal benefit. And you have to have been divorced for at least 2 years.
Okay.
So that's another requirement. So there you can actually, file sooner than that, but you have to kind of get into some fancy paperwork and so forth. But as you point out, remarriage does terminate the benefit. But in a lot of cases, as far as a personal decision on remarriage, if you are marrying someone from whom you can also claim a spousal benefit, sometimes financially it's really a wash. It's not always a primary concern. Whereas for the survivor benefit, because you again with the survivor assume the full benefit amount from your spouse, that may carry with it a bit more of a financial kind of component to the personal decision.
Yeah, I actually, that's a really good point. I just sort of forgot about that. So, when you remarry, you go into the other person's benefit. Like we talked about, you have a spousal benefit, and that could actually improve your spousal benefit if you have a higher earner as your second spouse.
Yeah.
I was thinking of it in terms of like alimony, where it would just completely go away if you remarried, and that is not the case. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So we are on our half hour here, Jake, and so this conversation went really fast, a lot faster than I expected
Yeah.
it to go on these benefits. And I think we're going to do one more. We're going to get into the weeds a little bit more on. I forget.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to cover one more episode and get a little bit more into the taxation of Social Security, at least as kind of a more of a review. We did touch on that in the last episode. We're going to talk about certain elements if you were particularly working for a government entity and were not contributing to Social Security, how that could impact Social Security, and kind of hopefully that's not a surprise to you when you file. Maybe have some time to talk about how to read your benefit estimate, or at least, kind of what's available on the site there. And the earnings penalty, touch on that. But I think we do also want to spend some time just talk about, okay, what's the current state of Social Security? Because when we think about we're all getting information on Social Security. Well, if we're looking at the headlines are really pointing to a lot of bad news for Social Security on the horizon, and into the next decade. So let's talk about that a little bit and kind of how we're factoring that into decisions on filing.
Yeah, and I'm just going to expect a whiteboard back there for you to write all this stuff down and walk through with arrows and highlights and all that good stuff. So as always, I appreciate you coming in with the details there. I tend to ask a lot of the questions, and so thank you for having all that information. Great conversation as usual. Thank you all for joining us. We are very grateful for your time, and any suggestions or for topics or how we do this thing, feel free to share. So have a great day.